All right. Hopefully, the Trojans can find the end zone this week in Austin. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down USC as the Trojans travel to Texas. Of course, this was a barn burner, somewhat unexpectedly last year, as the Trojans were a 2-touchdown favorite and escaped against the Longhorns at the Coliseum. We bring in Scott Wolf from Inside USC. Scott joined us for the first time last week, and we appreciate the contribution. That was Scott, just fresh off of JT Daniels' opening game against UNLV. And I hate to be cliched, and I hate to do what everybody else does, but we kind of have to start with Mr. Daniels because he's the focus of the talk there, I'm sure, when it comes to college football in Los Angeles. Well, he got some first game jitters out of the way, played pretty well against the Rebels, but then here we go against Stanford. That was a bit of a rough stretch for him.
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about this last week in terms of how would he respond against a real team or a quality team. And I think you saw, he left the game with an injury early, but you saw he got hit. And I don't know if he got hit much in high school. I heard from people he didn't get hit a lot in high school. And it looked like he changed a little bit after they hit him a couple times. And he looked a little more nervous. He looked like he was worried about that pass rush. He was locking on to receivers. So I think it was a big game for him in terms of kind of showing him the things he has to work on and improve, because he didn't look like the superstar quarterback that got all the hype coming into USC. And I don't think he's the reason they lost, and they have a lot of other issues. But, there's been people saying, well, he's just going to replace Sam Darnold and be the next Sam Darnold. And I think that's not the case, obviously, if you watch the game Saturday night.
Yeah, so you mentioned other issues, and if we stick to the offense, last year, and we talked about this a few weeks ago in regards to comparing what USC might be this year versus what they were last year, which was a star-studded offense at the skill positions, but very dysfunctional in a lot of ways, turning the ball over, not good in the red zone, offensive line, which probably gets underplayed, maybe the most important unit on the field, not as good as it could be. What else did you see along the offensive side of the ball that may need some serious work?
Well, I know you asked me last week about the offensive line, and I thought the offensive line on the pass protection was very poor. USC did run the ball. They didn't do a good job protecting Daniels, though, I don't think. I think Stanford, wants to blitz and put pressure on the young quarterback. I think Texas will want to do the same thing. And that offensive line did not show that it was capable of handling that. And then on top of that, the receivers, I don't think were getting a lot of separation either. The veteran receivers, Michael Pittman and Tyler Bonds, that's a big problem. They don't look like they did last year at this point. And Stanford, I don't know if it was Stanford or USC decided to take the start section out of the game. Hardly had any touches. So that was a big problem. And then, ironically, they were running the ball pretty well. And the run blocking wasn't bad. And it didn't seem like they were committed to it. So you have a lot of satisfaction, I think, from the fans right now with the play calling, and on top of that, the performance. So they have a lot of things they have to fix this week.
So hopefully, Scott, we got to hear most of that answer. I'm asking in the live chat if they heard you kind of faded out after a few seconds, and then I didn't hear much. And hopefully your rock solid analysis came through on that one. Yeah, apparently we had some issues with the audio on that. In terms of Stanford not doing a whole lot on offense, but then again, it's difficult to judge because they didn't have to once they got a comfortable. And when I say comfortable, it wasn't a blowout, but with so much confidence in the defense shutting down USC, it's hard to judge whether Stanford could have done more offensively. Obviously, they were just protecting a 2-score lead in the second half.
Yeah, I think it looked to me like David Shaw wanted to kind of run out the clock a little bit on the play calling he was doing. He was very conservative, and I thought they were passing the ball pretty effectively. So I'm not sure why he was running it up the middle as often as they did. He won by 14 points, so he's probably going to defend that. But I really thought they should have opened up the playbook because I thought USC looked susceptible in the secondary. And I think we talked about that last week, that UNLV couldn't pass the ball. But what was going to happen when a quarterback can pass the ball? And AJ Costello didn't look like he got pressured much during the game. And he was finding guys open quite a bit over the middle. So I think Texas probably was watching that film and seeing, they've got an opening there offensively.
Of course, Cam Smith has been a star on this team since his freshman season, and the game that really highlighted that was the 3 interceptions at home against Utah, and the pick 6 as well. He's got 16 tackles. He more than doubles, or exactly doubles, the second most productive player on the USC defense. 3 tackles for loss. He's got a sack. Porter Gustin, of course, we know about him and his contributions with 2 sacks and 2.5 tackles for loss coming in. Anybody, it's only been 2 games, but there's such a churn of personnel in college football that we are always looking forward to that next wave of players. So whether that's offense or defense, any particular guys that stand out, as whether they've stood out in a positive fashion or they need to stand out the rest of the year, but guys that we don't know a whole lot about?
Well, I think the biggest issue for them is in the secondary. They started a freshman at safety, Isaiah Polamau, and he dislocated his shoulder, and he's out now. So now they're using their 3rd or 4th safety because they had a couple guys suspended or transfer out before the season started. So they're now down to like the 4th guy who would have played if everyone was on the roster. And that's a issue. I mean, they have depth issues already, and we're in week 3. So that's a concern to me. The defensive line, I think, has played okay. Not great. I think the linebackers have been okay, but not great. The problem is the defense came in with a lot of accolades. Porter Gustin and Cam Smith were preseason All-Americans. And, ironically, right now, I think they rank 122nd in the nation in yards per carry allowed. And they have given up some big plays, but still, it's a glaring stat when you look at their defensive stats. And I know Texas has a lot of problems in their first 2 games, but they've got to be thinking, we got a chance to run the ball Saturday night.
Well, Scott, as you well know, in watching college football for a long time and covering it, it's difficult at this point in the season. There's always that, is it this or that kind of evaluation. There's only been 1 or 2 games. So was so-and-so really that good? Or maybe so-and-so wasn't as good as we thought they were. Well, the Stanford defense was supposed to be their weak spot. Stanford was supposed to challenge for a Pac-12 North title and be a top 15 type team, but it was supposed to ride on Bryce Love and KJ Costello being a much better quarterback with some receiving talent like we typically don't see at Stanford, and that the defense was the weak link based on my Stanford feedback that I get, and they shut USC down to 3 points. So we're going to see in the future, obviously, if Stanford's able to sustain similar defensive prowess, but that seems to be a little alarming. And then we'll go back to the storyline of Clay Helton and how well can he prepare his team for big games. Well, not so much last week. We'll see what they've got for Texas.
Well, yeah, I heard the same thing about Stanford's front 7 was going to be the weak spot. And they lost some guys that were pretty good last year. So didn't look like it on Saturday night, though. When I was watching the game, I thought their front 7 looked pretty good, and they did a pretty good job rushing the quarterback too. So maybe that's a surprise, and maybe USC's front 7 isn't quite as good as everyone assumed it would be. So I think we're still trying to figure out USC's identity, and that's always been an issue under Clay Helton: is what is the identity of the team? Because offensively, they kind of bounce around, and defensively, they tend to be up and down. And then, the biggest thing is there's a great stat that Clay Helton's 0-5, I think, against Power 5 schools when he didn't have Sam Darnold at quarterback. And I'd argue the only thing missing Saturday night for USC is they didn't have Sam Darnold around to bail them out in the fourth quarter. That's what he seemed to do most games last
Hey Scott, you really faded right at the end. So you were saying that the one thing that you would argue that if Sam Darnold was around, and what
I
was the
think
thought there?
he would bail them out and magically win the game like he did several times last year. But they don't have that now. They're more like everybody else. So I don't know how they're going to overcome not having this magician at quarterback who had a really good game with the Jets Monday night, and Helton can't rely on that now as his kind of trump card to just win games. So I think that's going to be a big problem down the road.
So the recruiting news at this point in the year is kind of simmering. It's not every so often a kid will pop up and say, I've committed to so and so. But so not necessarily do I expect you to have much recruiting news. But overall, what's the 2019 class look like? Is it pretty stellar again?
Well, it's still early in terms of commitments, but um, the thing is, SC always seems to get a top five class at the end of the day, and a bad recruiting class is top 10. So I think USC recruits USC. There's kids that want to go there. They don't care who the coach is. It's in LA. It gets a lot of attention. It's a marquee school, so they're going to get the guys. The question is, are those recruits going to come in and improve and play better? And I think that's one of the raps on Clay Helton is that they don't always come in and play better. They just stay at one level. So I expect them to have a really good recruiting class in December and February on the signing days. But I don't know how much it matters if they're still losing to teams that didn't get as many five-star recruits as USC did.
All right, we got Scott Wolf on the line from Inside USC. Scott and I connected on social media. I appreciate him responding to my request for. So our situation here, Scott, is a number of people love USC football, and obviously it's one of the brand names in college football. And a number of people on my channel need to hear some USC talk. I can only supply so much as I try to cover everyone. So I appreciate you in particular stepping up to help us out in recent weeks. Do you have any real good feel for what might happen Saturday night in Austin?
Well, I think it's a tough game because Texas has been pretty bad. It seems like the first two games, and the thing I've noticed is Texas only had one sack in the first two games. They're going to play a freshman quarterback tonight, so they better figure out a way to get pressure on JT Daniels. They want to win the game, and I don't want to say Tom Herman's in his second year, but it sounds like it's kind of a big game for him, and he better win this game because they've been a disappointment up to this point. Let's be honest, and they were a top 25 team before the season, so I think they have a lot to prove in this game. And USC, does not do well on the road in big atmospheres, big time games. So are they going to shake that identity? Is Clay Helton going to, get his team to play without looking sloppy? And is the play calling going to be effective? So both coaches, I think, are under a lot of heat this week.
Yeah, I got a number of people on the line on the live chat here with not any particular comments to pass along for you to respond to, but some Clay Helton bashing and some USC mild bashing, just in that. Hey, I think our guy Buckeye State Sports pointed it out or gave a pretty good analogy that USC is the prettiest girl in school who goes out with a nerd.
Is the nerd the head coach? I'm just wondering in that analogy.
But yeah, it just seems like the institution, the football program, has everything going for it and should never have a downturn because who doesn't want to go to LA and enjoy the weather and the other scenery out there and maybe play some football and become a star.
Well, if you look at those recruiting classes, I mean, they're all top five, so there is no reason they shouldn't be in the top five. And then Stanford's recruiting classes aren't the same as USC's, and then you see Stanford kind of dominate large parts of the game, and that's where the frustration occurs from the fans. They don't understand. We have the best recruiting classes, the Pac-12, as good as anyone in the nation. Why aren't we dominating teams? Why is Notre Dame blowing us out? Why is Ohio State dominating us? Why can't we beat Stanford? I mean, Clay Helton has a very thin support even at the best of times, and after a loss, very shaky.
So I'm going to put Nick Saban and Urban Meyer in one category. There's not a whole lot of those guys walking around with multiple
Sure.
national championships, especially since it seems like any program they go to instantly becomes so much better. But then there's that next collection of guys that in the right circumstance, and you brought up the name last week, Chris Peterson. What a job he did at Boise State. He goes to Washington. They suddenly go from they were in the abyss at one point, but they were getting better. They were okay. And we know that they've been able to do it historically, but he makes them a top 5 to 10 program. And there's a few guys, Dabo Sweeney. We think of Clemson as being a powerhouse. Clemson was going 7-5, 8-4 for 30 years. And suddenly they're a national brand and power. So there are other guys out there. You would just think that USC would latch onto one of them.
Well, here's the problem. If you look at who USC's hired as head coaches over the last 50, 60 years, it's always a guy who was an assistant at USC or, very close geographically to USC. They don't really go out and do a national search. And, okay, they're not going to get Urban Meyer or Nick Saban, but are you going to tell me that they couldn't call Virginia Tech or Memphis and get a positive response from their coaches for the USC job? I mean, if they really wanted to go get somebody who's a quality coach that has proven that they can win, there's guys out there that would run to USC for the job.
You would think so. Scott Wolf, Inside USC. Please check out the Twitter handle there, and that'll lead you to, I believe it's InsideUSC.blog, correct?
Yes, InsideUSC.blog.
Absolutely. So you check out the USC football coverage right there. Scott helping us out tremendously as USC gets ready for Texas. I'm going to stay on the line for just a couple minutes. I'll take some phone calls if anyone would like to join the call in with 860-325-3687. Scott, we appreciate you jumping on board. We will get this tweeted out soon. And again, enjoy the game.
Thank you. I hope we can talk soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Mark.
So that's Scott Wolf from Inside USC. I'm going to hang on the line for just a few minutes in case somebody wants to chat some college football. I know a number of you on here are not shy, but at the same time, I will certainly take in some baseball highlights, work on Mark Rogers TV, and probably hit the sack at some point. The aim is usually 11 o'clock, but it usually turns into about 3 a.m. But 860-325-3687. I will, at this point, also take suggestions on the channel because I've got a number of ideas of what I may or may not do here coming up in the future because we need to shake things up and do things just a little bit differently to gain some traction here. 860-325-3687. I'm going to throw that into the chat. And there's another upgrade for you. Of course, working in the off season to get some software, some production software where I'll put up the graphics and some music and we'll make it look maybe not pretty, but a little bit more presentable and have the phone number right there for you on a regular basis where you guys can have it locked in all the time. Yeah, I see with the Cincinnati Reds all over the LA Dodgers here. I don't know what's going on today or tonight, but 7 consecutive wins. Maybe they made it 8 today, and we've got to call into Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. So stand by.
The call will start at the beep.
Hey, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who do I got on the line?
Hey, Mark, what's going on? It's LV Live. I called in about a week ago. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. I see you just joined the chat here.
Absolutely. I saw that you had the SC talk going on. It was funny. I was about to hit the sack myself, and I said, I got to hop on. I got to talk to Mark.
Yeah, so what you got?
So, of course, I'm sure, I saw the game last week, and I watched exactly how bad we looked against Stanford. It's frustrating because when you see the talent out there and you see what we have and you see the great talent that we have in the players, you say to yourself, okay, what's going on? What's the issue? But I'm a person who kind of just thinks rationally, understands, and doesn't get emotional about it. Preparation is key. And for one thing that I do know is that you can't continue to do this and you have different players there from different years and it's the same thing over and over again, especially with the offensive line play, and not look at coaching. You have to look at coaching because then you have to break down and say to yourself, why aren't these guys prepared? They're too good to not be. I mean, they're 4 to 5 star guys. So obviously there's something wrong in practice to when they come to the games, they pretty much are just not locked in to what has to happen on Saturday. And I mean just mentally because the talent is there. So it's something that Clay Helton's not doing. The reality is this. Sam Darnold saved a lot of their jobs. Because they would have lost a lot of games if it wasn't for Sam. And now he's gone, of course, with the Jets, played well the other night. Now you're seeing exactly because it's the same exact team. They're doing the same exact things. There's no way that they should have went to Stanford and lost the way they lost with who they have and with who's been put in place. I don't know what type of offense T. Martin. I don't know what he's running, but it's like grab bag. They have no plan. If it's 3rd and 2, let's not run the ball. If it's 4th and 2, at least with 3rd and 2, you could possibly get 1 yard. So obviously they have no identity in regards to who they are. What type of offense are you running? What type of defense are you running? So now, like I said before, and I told you last week, if Clay Helton doesn't take this team even close, or if he doesn't win the South, how about that? If he doesn't win the South, I think he's on his way out. Because I think the pressure will kind of get squeezed on Lynn Swann and those guys. And I think they'll have to make a move in regards to getting him out of here. Because it's the same thing year after year. There's no way. With the Pac-12 and as weak as they are, USC should be skating backwards with their eyes closed to the playoffs every year. That's exactly how it should be.
All right, we heard it right here from LV Live. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, that's fine, Mark.
Got LV Live. You got a YouTube channel as well, right, sir?
Yes, I do. I do have a rant. I also have a podcast, Blue Steel Show. So please, guys, if you can support that show. But I just had to hop on, man, and give my rants in regards to my frustration, with this whole coaching staff. Because what stinks is that these kids are so talented. I mean, we're getting top tier kids who are believing in Clay Helton and believe what he's selling when he goes home and he's telling the parents, okay, this is what I'm going to do for your kid. Like this, and to kind of go out there and you see exactly the production that he's putting out there. And then he has a press conference right after the game. He says, I'm so proud of how my kids played and how hard what game was he watching? Like, that's the frustrating part. He says these comments and he makes these things. Are we all watching the same game? And one thing that I saw that Nick Saban said, which was great, and I know because I played football in high school and college, and he said, in order to play this game, you have to be mentally tough. You got to be mentally tough, and you got to push yourself to the brink to see how far and how much you can take in order to be able to push yourself to be the best you can be on Saturdays. And what I remember from when I played was practice was hard during the week. It was hard, man. It wasn't easy. But then when it came time to play, and you realize the guys you were going against weren't as tough as you thought, it became easy and it became fun. Now, because at the end of the day, it's a game. You're supposed to have fun. You're supposed to enjoy yourself. The kids don't look like they're having fun. They look like they're unsure. They don't know. A lot of guys are second-guessing themselves. You can see it. And to me, that points directly to the coach. Because for some odd reason, he's lost it. And I honestly think USC is too big for him. I think he would do better at like a program like UCF or something like that. I think this is too much for him. because you get into big boy college football, and I think he can't handle the pressure. So I think during the week he doesn't know what to do. So it's funny because you mentioned Chris Peterson. That was like one of the main names that I mentioned on my rant. If I was USC, I would be on the phone next week to call him and see how we can negotiate getting him from Washington and bringing him down to SC.
Yeah, the guy has done it time and time again, and of course, Boise State had already started to build what they've become, but he's the guy that really took it off from there and vaulted it into national prominence. And then we see what he's done at Washington as well, where they've not been a factor since going back to the Don James days in the early 90s, and they're back at it, and they are the power of the Pac-12, it appears right now. Certainly, they've built some consistency over the last 3 years in going to major bowl games in the college football playoff 2 years ago, something that we'll see how long it takes Clay Helton or somebody to get USC to a college football playoff. Some could argue that as Pac-12 champion, they deserved a shot last year, but I don't think that there's much argument that they were not one of the top 4 teams in the nation or anything close to it last year. Top 15, sure. Top 4, no. And the talent would speak otherwise, that they should be able to get more out of what they have on this roster than, as you mentioned, I believe in our phone call from a few days ago, the scholarship reductions, the sanctions, all of that, such a far distant memory that it's no longer a valid excuse.
Very true, very true. I mean, now to me, what's his cover up, and also too, I think that if I'm a coach and I realize where I'm at, and I realize, like, you have to be honest with yourself, right? You got to look in your mirror and you got to say, okay, is this working? Whatever I'm doing, is it working? Why not learn from other people who have done it at a higher level? Why not give Pete Carroll a call? Don't get caught up in your ego. Give him a call and ask him, what did he do? Because obviously he did something right. Figure out what you need to do, because the reality is, if you don't get it right, you're out of here. You're going to leave. They're going to fire you. So you got to get it right, because people are going to say, like I'm saying, there's no reason he should not be winning at USC with the talent he has. That's what people are going to be saying. So the reality is, he's got to change, and he's got to change it fast. Like, you just have to be real with yourself and say, okay, some things have to change. Do I have to fire some guys? I might have to fire some guys that I didn't want to fire. I like T. Martin. He's a nice guy, but he's got to go. He's not doing a great job. I might have to fire, a guy who I kind of feel like is close to my family, Neil Callaway, who I've grown up with. He's a great guy, but he's going to have to go because the offensive line looks terrible. You got to make tough decisions, but it was kind of like that saying. I mean, I said it on my rant, like, nice guys finish last. And if you look at Nick Saban, you see him on the sidelines, you see Urban Meyer. They're the top dogs in their program. They don't care what it is. If the assistant coach isn't cutting it, they're out of here, and they're hearing it from him. I mean, we've seen it numerous times where he's been demonstrative to some of his coaches on the sideline, because what he's saying is, how the heck is this kid not running the right play? Aren't you coaching him during the week? What's going on? How does he not know? So it's no fire. It's none of that. So then I think that's why I say this may be too big for Clay Helton, because a part of that has to be looked at, because when your kids see what's going on, and they, you see what's going on in practice, they're a reflection of the coach. So if you don't know what to do and you're unsure, you think the kids don't know that? Of course they know that. They see that the coach is kind of, not sure, and they're making bad plays, or they're calling bad plays. Kids talk, players talk. And then that's when kids start transferring. And then that's when kids start talking and they start saying, hey, man, you shouldn't go to SC. They don't know what they're doing over there. And that's the last thing you want, for him to pretty much, destroy the program, because he just can't handle big boy college football. That's basically what it is.
So I just want to make a quick mention. I got Eric, Chris, and Emmanuel on the line. I just want to say hi to them. I know that they're jumping on the line saying hi. Let's understand. So I got the phone in one hand. I can't type with the other hand. It's just a disaster. I've tried it a few times and it's just a mess. So just don't want to bypass those guys. The one thing I will say is that part of the solution that you gave is, I think, exactly that. It's part of a solution. So Pete Carroll could counsel a Clay Helton and say, do X, Y, and Z. And there would be part of that, and it would probably be more like 20 things instead of 3. And Clay Helton could implement probably a third of those, because it's like, do this, start this at this time. It would be very regimented and black and white and tangible. But then there would be about 2/3 of it that Pete Carroll just couldn't incarnate into Clay Helton to say, you know, inspire these guys more, teach them better. It's just not in him. Possibly the great coaches. I don't know necessarily that Urban Meyer or Nick Saban know more about football than other guys walking around at other programs. It's just that something that just instills fear, healthy fear, inspiration, and credibility that you just can't put a thumb on. And maybe Clay Helton doesn't have that.
Right, that's all right. I mean, that's a valid point. I mean, they call it what we used to call it when I was coming up and playing. The coach, he has the juice.
That's
He's got the juice. He's got that thing, right? That you're kind of on point. But then to me, and you're making a valid point. My thing would be to him is that if you're not sure, then stop hiring first-year guys to run top-tier positions. If T. Martin's never been an offensive coordinator before, don't hire him. Hire somebody who's got 10 or 15 years of experience, because this is your first time doing this. So he made a good choice in getting Clancy Pendergrass, because Clancy has a lot of years. So with that being said, USC's defense hasn't looked perfect, but it's looked solid. You can say that, but that's because you have a guy in place who has years of experience. That's the important part, because then some of the areas where you're weak at as a coach, you can get those guys to uplift you in that area. And then through that, then your team will sense that. And then, you'll kind of have guys doing certain things for you. Nick Saban's a defensive guy. That's always been his claim to fame. Same thing with, not Urban Meyer, I'm sorry. So through that, he's never been the offensive guy. So he's gotten guys in there who do the offensive piece. But he's always been a defensive guy, so he knows the guys to get, the guys to recruit. So he's able to put guys in positions to be, and maybe that might be it. Maybe that might be Clay Helton's just not a good general. Maybe he's just a good soldier. And maybe that's why they run into the problems, because you have a soldier trying to be a general. And that's the problem. And in order to lead SC, they need a leader. And he's not that. And that's why you continue to do the same thing over and over. It's like the definition of insanity. So, and that's basically what's happening. And I just know, I'm sure the boosters got to be watching. I'm sure Lynn Swan's watching. He's listening, and they probably have a timeline or a time frame or something broken down. Like, if he doesn't do this, then that's when we'll pull the trigger. And it's sad to say, because Clay Helton is a nice guy. Obviously, people love him, and he does a great job there. But this is not a nice guy sport. In order to play football, you got to have an edge to you. That's just what it is. I mean, it's kind of like, because I play defense also, and I coach defense as well. You got to be a bully to play defense. You got to be a bully. You can't be a nice guy. That's just the name of the game. And I think he just doesn't have that juice that you need to really be the coach of SC.
And it's one of the reasons why Mark Richt is drawing some criticism right now at Miami, and that remains to be seen. I think it's a little bit different of a narrative based on what he accomplished at Georgia. But again, is he quite that ilk? There's nothing wrong with Mark Richt. Just about any program in the country would love to have him, but is he that? Is he what they want him to be? Is he that standard? There's only a few of those guys, and maybe he's not that, and maybe Clay Helton is not as well. I have difficulty adding to any of that, because you just polished up a beautiful soliloquy there, LV Live. So join LV Live at his YouTube channel. We will certainly support it, because he brings some credible college football analysis. So I love to hear that.
Thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate it, man. And let me get to bed. It's getting kind of late here on the East Coast.
Yeah,
so
for sure. You have a good night.
All right, take care.
All right, I may take one more. If anybody out there wants to talk, 860-325-3687. I'll put it right here, 860-325-3687. And then I'm probably going to run. I am going to run right after that if anybody wants to talk. Mark made it to a national title game and then ran into Zeke. Mark Richt. Mark Richt? I thought we were talking about, Mark Helfrich, of course. All right, so we got a call coming in. Let's see who has decided to call in. A few people were saying that they wanted to call in. Mark Rogers TV, voice of college football. Who do we have on the line?
Hey, you got Bash again.
Bash. All right. It's been a rough day for you. Is that what I saw?
Yeah. I don't know if you saw that, but I was just in the car for like 13 hours today. So I was, because of the hurricane, I got family who's down there, brother military, not going to say where he's stationed or anything,
Sure.
but he's stationed in the Carolinas. That's all I'm going to say. He has a wife and a young child. He has to stay there, but his wife and child is coming up here to Ohio. So we went down to Winston-Salem, which was the best meeting place there. It's about 6.5 hours away from here. We went there, stayed there for about 45 minutes, came back, probably took maybe an hour break for lunch. So it was just a long day. It's nothing too serious. Thoughts and prayers with everyone out there affected by the hurricane. Really, the first thing I was actually going to call about is just all these games that are canceled by the hurricane, and it is just a big deal for sure what's going on down there in the Carolinas with this hurricane. And like I said, thoughts and prayers to all of them. And I hope everyone gets out safely, and I hope everyone, just best case scenario for everyone that is going to be involved with this and their families affected in the Carolinas.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know a few different families down there in the Carolinas. I'm in contact and have been over the last couple hours with one in particular, one of my best friends. And excuse me. Yes, certainly we want to pass along all our thoughts and prayers concerning the weather conditions down there. And some of the projected forecast is not good in regards to not just the severity of the storm, but how long it may hover over the Carolinas and continue to cause damage and flooding. That's the big concern as well. All right, Bash Gaming.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much for the call tonight.
Well, there was actually a couple more things. Is that fine,
Sure.
or are you wanting to wrap this up?
Go right to it.
It'll be quick.
Sure.
All right. So let me just start with this, and I'm just going to make this statement blatant. Clay Helton is not getting fired this year. He's coming off of 2 Pac-12 championships. He's coming off of
1
Rose Bowl 2, wasn't it? No, sorry, they didn't. No,
Sure.
They didn't. Okay, that was
point well taken.
They didn't have one.
Just wanted to correct you, but point well taken.
They made the Rose
Sure.
Bowl, and they won the Rose Bowl as a Pac-12 representative. And then the next year they won the conference, and they got to New Year's Six Bowl in the top 10 at that point. And, you can argue whether or not they were really a top 10 team. They were in the top 10 of the final college football playoff rankings. They did get beat down by my Buckeyes in that bowl game. But I also got to say this. You got to base that success that he's had, and you're really looking at a start of Sam Darnold away from in the beginning of the season in 2016 from possible playoff appearance, and then going back to last year, just a crappy game on a Friday night away from a possible, and I said possible, playoff appearance. So Clay Helton, the only reason he would get fired is if he doesn't make a bowl game. And I just don't see a path where USC does not make a bowl game with all their talent, with all that they got. And, none of their games are really necessarily cupcakes. They already got that one group of 5 that they have on the schedule out the window. Everything else is Power 5, if you include Notre Dame as a Power 5. So Clay Helton, he's fine as long as he makes a bowl game and wins that bowl game. If it's 6-6, I think he's going to be 7-5, 8-4. I think he's going to survive this year. Next year, he's going to be on the hot seat if they are, as I think they will be.
So I completely agree with you. The one thing I will say, Bash Gaming, and you can take off if you'd like, but that So I agree with the analysis right there. Clay Helton is not getting fired this year, as Bash Gaming so eloquently pointed out. He takes over at the conclusion of 2015, so that's pretty much a honeymoon period in which nothing's going to be counted against him unless the team imploded. And then 2016, of course, they get off to the rough start. Some could call into question why he didn't start Sam Darnold out of the gate, but regardless, Darnold starts after a 1-3 start. He loses the game against Utah, but plays extremely well. They go on the big run. They were the best team in the Pac-12 at the end of the season. They beat Washington on the road in Seattle by 2 scores and won the Rose Bowl. Colorado was not in their league. It would have been nice to see a rematch of USC and Washington in the conference championship game. Regardless, they turn around last season, and even though last season was marred by difficult showings against top quality competition. They lost in a tricky game on the road on a Friday night in a rainy situation in Pullman, and then they got crushed by Notre Dame, and then they finish up with a lousy outing against Ohio State. But before that, they win the Pac-12 championship for the first time in 9 years. And now you're looking at a situation in which they're going to finish with a decent record, but they've got a true freshman quarterback. So I doubt if he's going to be held to account for going, let's say, 8-4 with a true freshman quarterback. And then I would completely agree. Then it's going to be like, okay, you've had the kid for a year and he's got 13 games under his belt. Now you need to do something big here in 2019. So that's going to be on Clay Helton's resume, and that's going to be the expectation placed in front of him for next season. We're kind of talking, you can take it either direction, what should be or what is, and that's what is. That's unless the rails come off completely and it's just a train wreck by the end of the year.
Bowl game would be rails coming off for USC.
Pretty much. You know, you could see them losing, let's say, to Utah, to Texas, to Notre Dame, and maybe they trip up against somebody else. There's 4 losses that gets them to 7-5, and that they still get to a bowl game, but that's a pretty bad year. I had them at 8-4 preseason. Yeah. All right, Bash, we appreciate you calling in. No, it's been a long day, so we appreciate the support.
Okay, that's fine. All right, I'll talk to you tomorrow or whenever. Next time I get to talk to you. I'll see you later.
All right, Bash Gaming. Good night. Mark Rogers TV, voice of college football. Buckeye State Sports, I believe, is still on the line, and I promised him Thursday's lineup. And, of course, I want to get that out to everyone. And so let me call that up. It'll just take a quick second. So I know that we've got BC and Wake playing, and what I had lined up originally was a little post game with BC, Dan Rubin from Eagles Insider, and Robert Reinhardt from Blogger So Dear. But that game's been pushed back to 5:30 Eastern time. So I'm still going to be at work. I'm not going to get home until close to halftime. So I'm going to do some post on Wake and BC. I'll probably DVR it and want to give my insight, even though about 13 people are really into watching and getting my instant analysis on Wake and BC, but that's just what I do, what I enjoy doing. So throughout the rest of the night, we've got a big night lined up here, and in between, I'll watch college football. But at 7 o'clock, Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone to talk Ohio State, TCU. And you TCU and Big 12 fans, believe me, I have attempted to get on TCU guests to balance out the conversation, and I failed to get any response. So we talk Ohio State with Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone, Ohio State football talk at 7 o'clock Eastern time. Then at 8 o'clock, Chris Fetters, Washington. He's from Rivals to talk Washington Huskies taking on Utah. 9 o'clock Eastern time, we've got Cam Underwood from State of the U to talk Miami with the Canes with a tricky trip to Toledo to take on the Rockets. So 7 o'clock Ohio State with Tony Gerdeman, 8 o'clock Chris Fetters and the Washington Huskies report, and at 9 o'clock Cam Underwood, State of the U to talk Miami. And we will also have call-in featuring you and your perspective on college football, and I'll also have a take on Wake and BC, because even though I don't watch it, won't have the opportunity live, I just want to watch that football game to see those two teams play. All right, that's a Thursday night on Mark Rogers TV. please give us your suggestions, which, again, I am very much determining and rethinking this whole situation of my channel, but we'll let you know. And always looking for your comments and questions and suggestions on what I should do here with college football and also the channel platform as well. Right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We will see you tomorrow night at 7 o'clock Eastern. Tony Gerdeman talking Ohio State TCU.